Hello and welcome to today's Pharma Forum webinar sponsored by Syneos Health, Health Trends 2025, Reimagining What's Possible. I'll just be introducing the webinar today, which as panelists from Syneos Health, our experts include Dr. Jane Williams, Batisha Anson, and Stephen Hoelper. So they'll be self-moderating the conversation today, but just a few admin details. Pharma Forum will be posting live on LinkedIn with the tidbits that are discussed as regards trends for this year. It will be available on demand after the fact if you can't stay for the whole live webinar. And do remember to please send in your questions, at which point I shall hand over to Dr. Jane Williams herself. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. So, imagination is everything. It is the preview of life's coming attractions. That was Albert Einstein. And as we reveal our 2025 health trends, reimagining what's possible, it's clear the future of health is powered by data and technology. While these powerful tools are still in their infancy, their use is no longer rare. And as access to data grows and new applications are developed, they are sparking creativity, imagination, and the mandate to think differently. Digital health technologies and digital therapeutics in areas like the neurosciences and women's health are stimulating a reimagining of how gaps in care can be narrowed and models of care can be reshaped to be more precise, personalized, and holistic. Collaboration will drive innovations in clinical trial acceleration, real-time monitoring, and predictive modeling. Genetic medicine, including cell and gene therapies, has achieved significant breakthroughs in cancer and rare disorders. Researchers now envision a larger role for genetic medicine in addressing chronic conditions. Combining creativity with curiosity will uncover new patterns in real-world data and generate evidence that meets regulatory standards. Advances in technology and patient insights are awakening us to the art of possibility, emphasizing the importance of empathy in addressing global healthcare needs. Our report explores 10 trends that represent how the healthcare industry is reimagining what's possible in the years ahead, including in rare disease, women's health, the emerging role in medical affairs, and others. Today, we'll focus on 4 trends. Our first is predictive sales intelligence and omnichannel, a new synergy. Predictive sales intelligence tools and AI advancements, combined with deepening understanding of behaviors and motivations, are dramatically altering the HCP engagement landscape. Stephen, can you tell us a little bit more about this trend?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Williams. I appreciate it. So healthcare professional access in the United States has reverted to pre-pandemic levels, dropping from 60% in 2022 to 45% in 2024. And this is due to factors like hospital and health system consolidation and increased patient loads. Now, many patients are still behind schedule on their care as they defer it post-pandemic. And as a result, that's clogging up some of the access for physicians. Life sciences companies are focusing on omni-channel integrated sales and marketing strategies to build deeper relationships with healthcare professionals. And they're doing that through greater engagement, customization, and predictive sales intelligence. Predictive sales intelligence tools, along with AI, are transforming the omni-channel landscape by providing deeper insights into HCP's attitudes, preferences, and behaviors, enabling more personalized engagement. But this requires combining quantitative data with qualitative insights to create meaningful, relevant content that resonates with HCPs amongst an increasingly noisy environment. Omnichannel strategies traditionally used for commercial delivery are now being applied throughout an asset's lifecycle to build long-term HCP relationships. Starting from the clinical development phase, these strategies help with recruitment and retention for trials and continue through medical affairs into commercial delivery, creating a seamless narrative and reducing silos between phases. This approach enhances our understanding of HCP behaviors and preferences, leading to more effective engagement and informed decision-making across the asset's lifecycle.
Thank you, Stephen. So how are these sales intelligence tools transforming the way the life sciences companies engage with HCPs?
Great question. So predictive sales intelligence tools are revolutionizing how life science companies engage with healthcare providers by offering deeper insights into their preferences, attitudes, and behaviors, as I said previously. We've all heard the saying that delivering the right message at the right time through the right channel can significantly impact customer engagement. Predictive sales intelligence tools take this a step further by considering the cadence and sequence of those related messages. Instead of sales and marketing leaders manually creating communication plans for different customer segments, AI can now recommend the most effective sequential plans and not only provide insights to the effectiveness of the message, but also how and when the message was received. This affords the opportunity to continuously measure the impact and apply those learnings to optimize future engagements.
So when you talk about engagements, can you talk a little bit more about reaching specialized and hard to find audiences?
Sure. I think from our experience, the most effective way we've found to reach those hard to find audiences is by leveraging as many channels as you can, and to gauge HCPs at the MPI level. So in the commercial space, it used to be there were more primary care teams. Now that many products have been specialized and require things like reimbursement support or MSLs to help have conversations with physicians, that's created this segmentation of the audience. So one of the suggestions is to bring those things together and start to look at things like endemic and non-endemic websites, messaging within EHRs, mobile applications, connected TV, engagement centers, and sales reps, and other specialized field-based resources like field reimbursement managers. Looking across those channels will give you the most effective data set to work with. So aligning the personal and non-personal promotional strategies with available insights such as channel reachability, prescription volume, patient volume, physicians' attitudinal and communication preferences, that can help maximize the impact on hard to reach audience. So in summary, there's been some segmentation of our approaches to reach physicians. And now we have to take a different step, look across multiple data sets to get to those hard to reach individuals.
So you've already mentioned physician prescribing habits, but can you talk a little bit about predictive analytics to better understand the HCP's behavior and motivations?
Sure. One method that we found particularly useful is qualitative data incorporation. So this is the combination of quantitative data with qualitative insights from direct interactions with HCPs that can help create a more nuanced understanding of their motivations and preferences. We also generate qualitative insights from longitudinal HCP surveys that better improve our understanding of differences between HCPs in various specialties within various countries who perform or practice in sites of care or other segmentation criteria that may be important to the commercial teams. So the other way is to advance our understanding of HCP behaviors and motivations is by leveraging adaptive learning models that continuously update and refine predictions based on new data, which can help anticipate HCP's changing needs and preferences over time.
Great, thank you so much for that. And then strategies that can be employed to ensure the seamless communication and data sharing in omnichannel programs. Can you talk about that?
Sure. This is always a challenge. I want to try to break this down into 3 steps. So first and foremost, consult with your legal team. I generally will conduct a concept review with a legal team or a compliance team. That's a really good first step to ensure that any data that you plan to use is appropriate for the intended purpose. So that's the first step. The second is find compatible partners. If you're working across channels and you need some media or a deployment solutions or sales team, choose media and deployment partners who can share data with the same level of granularity. For example, If many channels use MPI as the primary key, ensure that you have a standard method to link those data sets from a variety of sources. Third, leverage the interaction and response data. So use the data from different channels, such as in-person visits, virtual meetings, reimbursement requests, phone calls, and digital campaign responses as a feedback loop to understand productivity within your omni-channel landscape.
Great. And then can you describe some of the biggest challenges organizations face when integrating AI and predictive tools into their omni-channel strategies?
I sure can. So in the AI space, there's increasingly more techniques that have become available to people. Generative AI and causal AI are still evolving, and they're lending to a significant rapid disruption in this area. From my perspective, a major challenge for organizations is keeping teams up to date on new approaches while maintaining the necessary data science and data engineering talent for these initiatives to succeed. It's not necessarily a one and done type solution. You have to keep at it. You have to keep refining the models. Additionally, what's increasingly important is the shifting privacy and ethics landscape, and evolving viewpoints from various world governments are adding complexity to these efforts. Many of these, you've heard in the news, there's many initiatives around AI from a governmental perspective. We're not sure what the outcome of those are going to be at this point. So the other component that's very important is just to make sure that you're upskilling your current employees, both on the business teams and the technical teams. Because while we use the word AI, generative AI and others, it's important to really practically understand how you're going to apply these tools to your business problems. They're not always going to be one size fits all. The next one is integration with legacy systems. That can propose a significant challenge, as existing systems might not have a compatibility on the new AI solutions, and it may cause extra cost and complexity to do those overhauls. So it's not necessarily something that's going to be quick to market if you have some of those existing systems. And lastly, and this one's really important because you can come up with a solution and it kind of works, but the models aren't performing to the maximum quality, is data quality and availability. AI systems need a vast amount of high quality data, but many organizations face challenges with data that's siloed, it's out of date, it's incomplete. A common stumbling block, especially with traditional data science and generative AI projects, is finding and building suitable data sets to refine models and improve their accuracy.
Yeah, thank you for that excellent summary of this trend, Stephen. We really appreciate your analysis and interpretation. We're going to shift to discuss how, there's a consensus growing that inclusion and representation in clinical trials starts with diverse clinical trial teams, workforce development initiatives, plus efforts to expand clinical research sites in local communities, or building the foundation for clinical trial teams of the future that are more representative of the communities, the patient communities that they serve. Batisha, can you share some insights into our trend building clinical trial teams of the future?
Absolutely. And if I may, I first want to just take a step back and define what we mean when we talk about diversity. Through the years, I've heard numerous definitions, and I just want to ground us in terms of how we at Syneos Health see it and how we value that. But diversity simply means different racial, ethnic, gender, age, socioeconomics, and cultural backgrounds. And it's really important that we have that shared mindset, because it truly is all encompassing when we're thinking about the global populations and ultimately the patients that we serve. And really, as a industry, uphold that aim, knowing how it connects to both scientific imperative as well as health equity and certainly ethical integrity. So I just wanted to kind of lay the groundwork for, while I'm talking about it, what I'm referring to specifically. And it's really about diversifying the teams that are caring directly with patients at the site level, and then certainly how we are building teams within the infrastructure to ensure that we're representing those that we serve. So to your question, in terms of the trend report, I think there were a couple of things that really struck me. The first is it's evident that there's constant and ongoing mistrust, and particularly around historically marginalized communities for a variety of reasons. Certainly history, also lack of data that we need to ensure that we have greater and deeper understanding of these individuals, which Stephen just spoke about how we can bring some of that data forward. But it's also in terms of just quite simply patient voice and being able to actively listen. And so when I've been talking to different patients in my advocacy and patient affairs team, we are hearing consistently that patients still want to interact with providers that look like them, that understand their cultural nuances, understand their shared faith, maybe misconceptions associated with certain diseases or treatments because of the multi-generation factor. So that is something that we definitely need to be thinking about as we're building diverse clinical care teams, and certainly the enablement functions around those teams from industry. I think it's also really important to just note this isn't just my thinking, and this is certainly spotlighted in our trends report, but it's also been well documented by major health and public health authorities as well as regulatory bodies. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, my big takeaway from the trends report, and there were many, but something that I keep certainly at the forefront is the power and the importance of the diverse clinical trial care teams. They are the closest that we get to patients, and they greatly impact representation and inclusion as they're helping to enroll patient participants that reflect the demographic, the disease burden, and certainly have an ear to the ground in terms of what their distinct community needs are. So I really think that not only do they create those safe spaces that really provide the necessary and appropriate level of support, but we need to keep that at the forefront of our minds as we're creating recruitment strategies and referral programs to make sure that we're really creating that wrapping around what diversity means for the disease that we are testing. The disease, not the people, and then how we are being more human in terms of those that we're trying to effectively motivate, engage, enroll, and retain. So that's my big summation on that.
Thank you so much, Batisha. Can you share if there are other elements of clinical trial teams that should be considered for future success?
Certainly. I think, as I mentioned before, the clinical care teams are the closest to the patient. And when we look future forward, I see those providers as actually partners to patients, partners to caregivers, and certainly are partners of those of us that are also fortunate to be in this industry. And I mention that because when I spoke about patient voice, that is going to get much more prominent in the next few years, and certainly as we go to 2025, I'm sorry, to 2030, we're already here, to 2030 and 35, as there will be a crossover period here where I reside in the US as well as globally, where what we historically named minorities will be the majority. And so we really need to think differently in terms of culture, community imprint, language, health literacy, and prioritize that because the voices will get stronger. And I'm here for it. And so importantly, our regulators. There has been a groundswell of attention across global regulatory bodies, as well as health technology assessments, ensuring that we are prioritizing patients end-to-end across clinical delivery. And naturally, diverse clinical care teams sit across all of those points, from patient-informed study design to data collection to reporting back results, and really actively engaging them throughout the entire clinical journey, and then taking those lessons in terms of how then we are devising relevant and resonant strategies forward. But with that, I just want to add, while we're talking about diversity clinical care teams, we really need to be thinking about diversity teams across the full industry, from research sites to certainly medical affairs, because that really helps create that, bring forward those lived experiences And I think it's important for us to recognize the power that we each have to contribute to this in terms of our lived experiences when we're looking at protocol designs. That is an area that's not just about bringing in the sites, which is critical, and patients, but even our own experiences and thinking about the burden that we might be asking. And really, I think another important point within the report is the streamlining so that we're being less exclusionary and more intentional in terms of ensuring that we're prioritizing the patient populations. And that is something that we all share. As I mentioned, diversity we're all part of that. And so we can all really support what this means for the patient communities we're looking to serve.
So are there specific workforce development initiatives that have been most effective in fostering diversity within clinical trial teams?
Absolutely. And I think it's multidimensional. I think one, in terms of ensuring, as I mentioned, that we're hiring, and even when we're thinking about the expansion in terms of local clinical trial sites, that we're not placing people there, we're bringing the community in and providing the opportunity for local community members to be those clinical diversity care partners. But also what's really important that we think about mentoring, coaching, apprenticeships, and I can't say enough about paid internships to really ensure that we're being more diverse and socially responsible within the industry. We need to think differently in terms of what we are asking of those individuals and being really aware of socioeconomic and access differences. I think also something I know we've done here at Syneos Health and certainly other members of the industry is lowering the requirements for entry-level positions, thinking differently of education, and really prioritizing on-the-ground learned skills and opportunities for hands-on experience and prioritize that. So I guess my personal call to action here is to everybody reach out, coach, talk about the great benefits of being in our healthcare industry, and share forward any insights that you have against different cultures and communities, and importantly, providing professional experience opportunities to interact with people different than yourselves.
Thank you, Batisha. And, clinical trials are expected to become more complex. What other approaches will help build clinical trial teams of the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that one I mentioned around streamlining, which was a key takeaway from the Health Trends report. And what I mean by that, and anybody who knows me well knows that I was not an early adopter necessarily to AI, but what it does provide us is greater time to connect with humans. And so I note that because while trials are expected to get more complex, we now have innovative tools to be able to ensure that we're breaking through that complexity and really allowing more time to actively listen to our care partners and to the patients that we serve. And so streamlining our processes, our systems, considering the end user, and not building from just within, but what we know the broader stakeholder ecosystem needs and will use. I think that's really critical, that we're not inundating or overwhelming. So certainly from streamlining technology is critical, how we're interacting, and then within this all, how we're using this as opportunities to ready emerging healthcare practitioners. In school today, I reflect back of when I was in school, we certainly weren't where we are today in technology. I still write in script. So I just say that because we're really kind of catching up to where many of those that are currently in med school are already. And certainly I'm excited because I'm seeing great progress within the NIH in terms of how they just announced they're using AI to scan clinicaltrials.gov to be able to better identify eligible patients for studies. So there's a lot of great tools that we can use today to not make our trials less inclusive, but instead make them really intentionally built for the patients that we're here to serve.
That's great. And I think that, based on what you're saying, upskilling of everyone on the team, in all parts of the teams, to support these clinical trials that are becoming more complex is going to be necessary. But part of that, as you mentioned before, that mentorship and passing along the information that we already know to those coming on board to support those trials are going to be helpful. Thanks, Batisha.
Absolutely. Mhm.
Have we missed anything? Any opportunities that you think we should set sights on for 2025?
Yeah, I think, what stands out to me is certainly listening to the sites. They know the communities that we're trying to connect with more than we ever will, but also appreciating our own experiences. I know I talked about protocol design, but also in terms of the strategies that we're providing to effectively engage community members to raise their hand, to want to participate and see the value in doing so. So I think also looking at it through the lens of the burden from patients as well as from sites, and being able to say, let's think about what are we asking in terms of number of visits? What are the transportation needs? What is the cost to actively participate? And then looking at the epidemiology and the patients to really determine where can we make adjustments to really reduce that burden. And I think that that's where, diverse clinical trial teams, which we are all a part of, can really and should prioritize that for the future.
Thanks, Batisha. Somehow I managed to hit the slides again. Apologies. I'm a doctor, not a techie, but anyway, so, what I'm hearing is that taking a patient-centric approach, continuing to take this patient-centric approach as we incorporate AI into clinical trials is going to be necessary. So appreciate that discussion. So let's shift a little bit. As we talk about diversity, we're going to discuss doors opening to clinical research in Southeast Asia. That's another one of our trends. And so we've got ongoing development in research infrastructure. Regulatory reforms are starting to make previously underserved countries excellent options for global research, ultimately improving access to new therapies and addressing national health issues. Can you talk a little bit more about that trend, Batisha?
Yeah, I'm really excited actually about all of our trends, but this one, because there's a lot of focus in the US in terms of the regulatory bodies, the number of trials. But the reality is Southeast Asia is thriving right now for clinical trials and will continue to in the future. And I just wanted to share a couple stats, if I may, to really ground us in why and how we need to be thinking about new emerging markets as we are looking to better understand how medicines work in distinct populations, and certainly ensuring that we're prioritizing genetic understanding. So with that, I'm going to cheat a little bit here just to make sure I get the numbers right, if I may. But Indonesia, as an example, has over 275 million people. That is nearly the size of the United States, just for perspective for anybody who's here in America. And that really presents a great opportunity for large patient bases for our trials. It's also, when we compare it to sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, which we often hear about from sponsors, it actually features greater genetic diversity, and it boasts one of the most genetically and culturally diverse populations globally. So the diversity within what we call the C region, referring to Southeast Asia, is absolutely invaluable for understanding treatment effects, varied genetic backgrounds, environmental conditions, knowing that medicines do have different efficacy and safety concerns, Eastern versus Western. And also looking at, I think, one of the great opportunities there, which is certainly aligned with therapeutic trends over the next coming decade, is that Southeast Asia also allows a greater understanding within rare genetic conditions and metabolic disorders, which we, as I mentioned, will see, unfortunately, an increase within or anticipate doing so. The other areas from a business and operations perspective is that the region has a great proximity. It's surrounded by major pharmaceutical hubs, and think of East Asia. So there's great logistical advantages, certainly from a manufacturing, product development, shipping as well. But also the costs. At the end of the day, we want to ensure that we are getting medicines to patients in need as quickly as possible. And cost plays into that in terms of the time. And so this region also allows an opportunity to conduct trials effectively. And they've created an incredible infrastructure to allow that to be a really go-to place for clinical research of the future.
So would you say that infrastructure is opening doors to clinical research in Southeast Asia?
I think it is for a variety of reasons. The regulatory bodies have already paved the way to ensure that, I don't want to say it's a clinical trial destination, but rather that it's an area that is leading in terms of clinical trials in that region. In fact, governments are streamlining, I think it's my word of the day, regulatory processes. I know that Indonesia's Ministry of Health has revised its materials transfer agreement to ensure that they're simplifying approval processes, they're increasing global collaboration, and meeting monthly even with major regulatory bodies to learn best practices, but as a feedback loop, not just taking it in, but also sharing as they're quite innovative in their own approaches. But countries like Malaysia and Singapore, they also now have expedited review pathways, which is really great. And as I mentioned, really reducing those study startup timelines.
And how do their infrastructures compare to other emerging markets?
Again, really sophisticated. I think when we think of Latin America, there's great diversity there, as well as certainly within areas of Africa. And they've made great strides, those two areas. But when we think about Southeast Asia, they're not as reliant as some other regions in terms of external funding or government pressures or challenges. As I mentioned before, the infrastructure, the regulatory bodies, the policies in Southeast Asia really are providing great opportunities. And countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore have invested in really robust trial ecosystems. So to give in a couple examples for anybody who not be aware, because I was thrilled to be able to have the opportunity to dig deeper into this, is Indonesia has a national biomedical and genome science initiative collecting genomic data and providing that as an open source from local hospitals. There's a national clinical research center also in Indonesia that's facilitating training, investigator matching, and what I spoke about, next generation upskilling and opportunity. And then also Singapore has a really substantial strategic partnership with the Onward Health Research, focusing again on investigator training and site readiness. They're literally creating site in the box to ensure that they're diversifying where sites are even outside of traditional health clinics. And then Malaysia also is doing the same. So ultimately, the region is driving great innovation and access for the patients that they serve. And I will just add that, strategic partnerships goes broader, where other regions might be heavily reliant on that. It's more of a handshake. I know we at Syneos Health are actively involved in partnering within this region, bringing both expertise, shared learning, and funding to the region so they can continue to invest in their infrastructure.
And so you mentioned some partnership opportunities there. Are there other things that sponsors could do to build these lasting partnerships in the region?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. And I would almost, see it emblematic of how we're interacting with patients, or should be. I think wherever we are looking to conduct trials and certainly have lasting relationships with partnerships, we need to ensure that we're understanding local context, cultural sensitivities, expressing with humility, and tailoring our engagements and not looking at anything as one size fits all. And even when I talk about Southeast Asia and the possibilities within Indonesia, there's still great diversity within there. So really ensuring that we're thinking locally and not nationally, and certainly not globally. but also investing in capacity building, the training programs, knowledge sharing, helping to ensure that digital health technologies, Asia is leading in digital health. So really understanding the channels that are not just resonating, but are transforming those regions are really critical, and helping to partner in terms of further development of health information and technologies. And then I think, it goes without saying, if you're going to go into a region, ensuring that you're investing in that regional's health needs, and certainly ensuring that we're also connecting in with the communities to not just assume we know what they are from AI or from what we hear from shoulder to shoulder as industry experts, but getting into the community and actively listening as well. And that will really allow our actions to be more authentic and sustainable.
Wow, that's great. Thank you so much, Batisha. Thank you for sharing that insight into our opening doors to clinical research in Southeast Asia trend.
No, absolutely. And thank you for your patience, because I'm really excited to hear from you, Dr. Jane Williams. We've covered a lot of ground around diverse teams and regions, and I'd really love to hear, because when I think about where you sit here at Syneos Health, you're really at that intersection of diversity, being our head of neuroscience, rare disease, and pediatrics. So I wanted to talk and hear from you about our 2025, I'm going to stumble over that, trend towards precision in psychiatry. Are we there yet? I understand there's still some way to go. Researchers and innovators are coalescing around new approaches that are more personal and precise, tech-enabled and data-driven, effective, and my favorite word, accessible. And digital therapeutics are setting that pace. We just spoke about that in Indonesia. How would you summarize this trend for us?
So precision in psychiatry is closing the gap between discovery and clinical practice. It's accelerating efforts to address serious mental illness with personal, precise, tech-enabled, and data-driven approaches. And unlike oncology's genetic and molecular precision, psychiatry's precision focuses on understanding the neurobiology and its role in emotional and behavioral symptoms. We have neuroimaging. It shows that individuals diagnosed with the same condition can have different biological causes for their symptoms. And it explains the trial and error nature of current therapies, right? So precision psychiatry aims to account for the complexity of mental illness by stratifying patients based on specific clinical symptoms, brain circuitry, physiology, cognition, genetics, and life experiences. So very complex, very complex. But this allows for better prediction of which therapies might benefit each patient. I'm going to give you a great example. So we have digital therapeutics playing a key role in this precision. So the FDA approved Rejoin in April of 2024. It's the first digital therapeutic for major depressive disorder. It was developed by Otsuka Pharmaceutical and Click Therapeutics, and a game changer because Rejoin delivers brain training exercises to target neural networks affected by depression. It leverages neuroplasticity for symptom reduction. And Otsuka is pricing Rejoin affordably to increase access. Other digital therapeutics are in development for schizophrenia and substance abuse disorders. Visual reality therapeutic Game Change by Behave VR received UK recommendations in 2023 for treating severe agoraphobia in psychosis patients. It offers automated cognitive behavioral therapy in virtual reality, targeting challenging mental health conditions. And looking ahead, precision psychiatry will rely on identifying neural biomarkers through neurotyping, genomics, and pharmacogenomics to personalize interventions. So we have AI and machine learning. It'll be crucial in analyzing this complex data to predict treatment responses. And advancing this precision psychiatry will require new approaches to development, commercialization, and patient care models. We also are seeing partnerships with academia and big pharma that will help facilitate this clinical development and leverage regulatory capabilities. And while precision psychiatry is not yet fully realized, it does represent a paradigm shift in understanding and treating mental health, moving towards more personalized and effective care for patients.
It's really interesting. So you've talked quite a bit about digital therapeutics and how they're shaping the future of psychiatry. What limitations do they face?
So as neurosciences advance, we can expect psychiatric drug development to and the treatment solutions to be more biologically based and dependent on neural biomarkers identified through neurotyping, genomics, and pharmacogenetics. However, we're not there yet, hence the trend. We're not there yet. We've got newly identified biomarkers. They're allowing us to classify patients given their specific pattern of brain function. We're able to personalize interventions based on a person's genetic profile. We've got AI and machine learning, which will be essential to identifying these patterns with complex data sets to predict treatment response. But again, we're at the beginnings of these solutions. And as we move forward, we still have a lot more data we need to collect from patients. Mm-hmm. We need to get approval from regulatory agencies to have these biomarkers be allowed for endpoints, et cetera, in clinical trials. So there's still a lot more that we have to do with any, I'd say, at the beginning of any treatment paradigm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm curious, though, with everything that you've said, which sounds like really significant progress, are there any risks associated with relying too heavily on tech-driven approaches in psychiatry? And if so, what should we do to mitigate those?
Well, I think the biggest risks are translating this promise of psychiatry into clinical practice. It's going to take time. Engaging caregivers, engaging patients, and engaging clinicians to use these data-driven approaches is going to take some time. Like I mentioned before, as with any new therapy, buy-in is key. It'll take thinking differently about development for these treatment paradigms for the psychiatrists. And they're going to want to see data. They're going to want to see metrics. They're going to want to see that the protocols that were used for these clinical trials have been standardized, and then see them in real world practice. So those are the biggest risks, in my opinion, in how this tech-driven approach for psychiatry is going to pan out.
That's great. Thank you so much. Really informative. And it's pretty incredible to think about how this marketplace has changed, or category has changed even, in the past 20 years. So looking forward to seeing how we advance it together.
Very different from when I was in practice, let me tell you. Paper charts. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So for everyone on the panel, as we look ahead, can what one change or advancement in your area of expertise do you believe will have the greatest impact on transforming the biopharma and healthcare landscape by 2030, and why?
Get started with that. So I think right now, from my perch in commercial and working a lot in artificial intelligence, it's this concept of getting beyond correlation and towards causality. So there's a new emerging trend to focus on causal AI. I think unlike traditional predictive models that identify correlations, causal can uncover real, actual cause and effect relationships between variables. It helps us understand the true drivers behind either in the future clinical outcomes or marketing effectiveness or operational effectiveness. And this is a very distinct change from when I started studying big data, 15 years ago. The saying was always, you're going to get correlation. You're not going to be able to achieve causality. So I think that's really interesting. I don't actually know what that means in the short term, but people are starting to invest significant time and energy there. I think the other part to that is there are, we throw the term around AI, but it's meant to help make us better at what we do. And I think there's an emerging technology trend of AI agents that help skilled people do their jobs more effectively. I think that is actually something that's really, really close to near term, if not already in effect. But I would see that accelerating through 25 and all the way into 2030.
Thanks, Stephen.
No, I certainly agree. So not to parrot what Stephen just mentioned, AI is going to have an incredible impact in our industry and ultimately health worldwide. I think the complement to that, and is that AI, as I mentioned before, lets us be more human. And so as health authorities and are really prioritizing, as I mentioned before, patients, I think the biggest change will be the role of patients within clinical trials, moving from subjects, which is never a good term, to participants, to now patients. I think that they're going to be more of consumers, and that we will be required to think differently about patient education, patient integration, patient access, and that in doing so, we will be diversifying clinical trial sites to be closer to the point of care. And certainly excited for that then to make clinical trial research cemented as a primary care option. And I don't mean primary care as in GPs, I mean as a leading care option and a main driver because of that change. I think within that, caregivers are going to also play a really important role in terms of the design and delivery of trials in the future. So again, when we're talking about patients and caregivers, we're talking about ourselves, the doctors we serve. And so we will all have more of a voice to inform the clinical research delivery, but also how we're showing up and what our expectations are around that.
Thanks, Batisha. For the trend in psychiatry, I think the intersection of neural biomarkers as well as neuroplasticity, and using AI and data to find solutions for patients is truly going to be transformative. We talk, I mentioned neurotyping. I mentioned pharmacogenomics. This notion that patients with similar symptoms have different neurobiology. I mean, that's, to me, is going to be key, and unlocking that vault is going to be a game changer. And I think we'll do that by 2030. So, all right. I think we have some audience questions, Nicole.
We do indeed, Jane. Some fascinating discussions there, and it has prompted a lot of questions to come in. But if we go through and pick some of the interesting ones in themselves, one viewer has asked, what are your thoughts about generative AI data, or otherwise known as artificial patients, substituting for or complementing real patient data in clinical trials in an effort to bring down costs and speed up clinical development? And the viewer says it might still be science fiction, but I believe I have heard about efforts going in this direction. So I don't know who wants to pose a response there. Who wants to take that one?
Stephen, do you want to tee it up, or would you like me to?
Yeah, I can start. So I think the question's around synthetic data sets. I actually think for a long time, when you look at patient-reported data that you get from digital health as applications, as we mentioned before, and this concept of synthetic data, I think there is a real opportunity for us, as long as those data sets reflect reality of the comparable or comparable patient population. I think there is a great opportunity to use synthetic data sets there. Now, of course, with everything new in this industry, we know it has to go through appropriate regulatory steps to make sure that that's best practice, and people have to be retrained on the use of it. But all in all, I mean, especially if we're talking about, extended window, I see that becoming a real and present option. In fact, some of the things that we do in causal AI modeling is we are using synthetic data sets, because you have to have the rights to use the data that you're working with. And, absent that, early in the development phase, you have to do some experimentation and exploration. And that's a good way to do it.
Yeah. And I think just to add to that from a best practice, oh, please, Jane, please.
No, go ahead.
Dr. Williams. Okay. I was just going to add that I think that everything that, I fully align with what Stephen mentioned. And I think just needing to validate that data with patient panels is really critical, whether that's through patient advocacy groups or, distinct patient panels that are living with that disease is absolutely critical.
And I was going to mention, very similar to what you were saying, Batisha, is the introduction of bias in those data sets, ensuring that you've got a big enough pool to ensure that data, that digital twin is truly a twin.
Yeah.
On to another question. The pharmaceutical, biotech, and CRO industries have largely ignored the African continent and its 1.2 billion people when recruiting investigator sites and patients for trials, except for those focused on HIV and other infectious diseases. And the question is, what can be done to take advantage of opportunities on the continent? Who would like to take that first?
Do you want me to? So we actually, I know that historically, and not too long ago, that was very much the case in terms of going there. I have seen, and I'm fortunate to say, many sponsors expanding their sites within Africa and other emerging markets, and certainly diversifying the portfolios of medicines that are being studied, and partnering with organizations such as WHO, national regulatory bodies, and also I think what's really important when we're thinking about regions such as Africa, how to ensure that anything that is being done is locally responsible and creating safe spaces based on what type of data and even what type of how we can categorize patient profiles. So I've seen a tide shift in terms of the partnerships, the progress, and certainly the products that are being studied there locally. And I anticipate that to continue.
Thank you, Batisha. Jane, go ahead.
Thank you. And Batisha, to your point, there are certainly countries, many countries within the continent that have the capabilities to conduct robust clinical trials with quality and provide quality data. And so expansion into those regions certainly should be priorities for customers, for sponsors.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jane. Stephen, did you have anything to add? Otherwise, we've got another question. No? Okay, I'll go to it. As I say, quite a few came in today, which is a good thing with webinars. So on to another one. With the US withdrawal from the WHO, potentially, and the likely HHS secretary as harbingers of things to come, what strategies can be used to maintain the gains made in clinical trial diversity, equity, inclusion, as well as continued dedication to data integrity and evidence-based medicine for the foreseeable future?
Great. So I'd love to share this question with Dr. Williams. We are both fortunate to sit on the executive steering committee for MRCT, as well as other strategic partners, but also meet regularly with customers. And I don't see that progress slowing. We believe and know that is a scientific imperative to ensure that real world patient populations have the opportunity to participate in trials and have access to the medicines that they need. And so this is very different than what might be happening in other industries and pockets. But I know that we have certainly prioritized this from our people, our processes, and our technology, and will continue to stay the course. And that very much emulates what we're seeing out of regulatory bodies across the globe, taking great strides in terms of ensuring that with respect to privacy, that patient communities are prioritized, aligned to diversity.
And to tee off on that, the alignment of research with regards to epidemiology is important, and that's what we've been doing for the past decade as we improve diversity in clinical trials based on either gender, age, ethnicity, excuse me. And so we're not going to stray from that, because the data shows that if you have a patient population experiencing an ailment, we should be researching that that population, that providing that research in that indication based on that population and that epidemiology. So we're just continuing to follow the science is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And I think reduce risk. The more we know about a medicine in terms of how it works within distinct patient subgroups within a population, the better that doctors can provide meaningful care, the more we and sponsors can look at their portfolio to not create a me too, but a what can be. So it's really critical that we have access and continually access to the data that Stephen spoke about, and prioritize that in everything that we do.
Thank you. Okay, so if we finish with one final question to leave summative thoughts for our viewers today, is there another trend that you feel is critical for the industry to influence clinical trial teams of the future? Stephen, let's go to you first, if that's okay.
I think the one that most strikes me, because I had spent most of my career in digital health and creating applications for caregivers and patients, as we've talked about so much, because as we all know, healthcare is delivered hyper locally, and it's, we create technology to help people receive care better, get information quicker. And I think the impact of where, in terms of patient care and engaging with patient, how do we use AI effectively within the constraints of privacy, within the constraints of their consent, within the constraints of sharing information with not only their family caregivers, but their professional caregivers. And I think that's where there's a huge opportunity. All of us, as we all know, we're either, we don't like the term subjects, and I don't like the term patients, but we are all seeking care at some point in our lives. And I think the better we can align to maximizing the positive experience people have with the healthcare system, that trickles down into the way that we develop medicine, the way that we interact with physicians. That's crucial for me. I think taking that patient first approach, figuring out how data can supplement it, is super critical. I actually don't know what that looks like yet, but I'm sure it will manifest itself in a variety of different ways. Some of the things that Dr. Williams said, it makes sense. We're using greater technologies to, whether it's pharmacogenomics or genetic testing or companion diagnostics for products, we're getting to a point where we're much more customized in the way that we deliver care. And I think at the end of the day, that helps us all create an ecosystem in healthcare that's more efficient, less costly, and gets better outcomes.
Absolutely. If I can add to that, I think you probably are, we're aligned in terms of the other trend, redrawing the map in terms of how data and AI and engagement deepen understanding of patient experiences. I would certainly encourage everybody to read the full trends report, but also there's a lot of great directional information there. I think, I spoke earlier about trust, and that's something that we all can build, but ultimately that takes, credibility, empathy, and then in doing so, that reduces the risk in all of the decision making that we're having, because we have to take it really seriously every step that we take within this industry. So I highlight that trend because it states that it requires deep dives into ever increasing volumes of data, which sounds like a lot, but we have our friend AI to help us. But at the same time, listening even more deeply and with empathy to a wider range of patients and caregivers about their needs, their preferences, their experiences, their preferred channels is critical. And that is something that now the regulatory bodies are expecting of us, and we should be expecting of each other. So that's the one trend that naturally, really not just spoke to me, but keeps me, that's my North Star.
And for me, the other The other trend that I'd like to highlight is the femtech trend. And we know that women are 75% more likely to use digital health tools than men. They're early adopters interested in ways to seek personalized care and efficient healthcare options. So we know that digital technology and therapeutics are not just are really going to be helpful in women's health. And it's not just a niche market, women's health, but it's a substantial and viable sector for investment. And it's setting examples for new models of healthcare for everyone. So I'd like to plug that one. I know that we need to wrap up. And I do want to say to the audience, if you haven't already, go ahead and download the Trend 2025 Trends Report. And we really appreciate you joining our talk today.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Yes, as we hear it now at the end of this webinar sponsored by Syneos Health, Health Trends 2025, Reimagining What's Possible. There is the report to read. Do sign up and receive your copy of it. And if you missed today's webinar, it is on demand and also has been live posted on LinkedIn. Thank you very much for your time. And all the panelists, thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Nicole.